You're listening to the PR Wind Down Podcast, the show for public relations professionals who are ready to see real change in the PR industry. We are your hosts, April White and Laura Schooler. Let's get ready to wind down. Laura!
What?
How have you been? Don't seem so excited to see me.
I'm pretty good. Look, I got a free sticker at Pliables today.
Ooh, is that because you go there every day?
They just put them out. I have so many Pliables stickers, but they do really cute, like,
That's really cute. What are you going to do with it?
I stick it on things.
What do you stick it on?
I have a little box that I put all my stickers on at the shore in New Jersey, so I might have to bring it there. It just holds pens and scissors and papers and coupons and all that stuff, so it's like contained on my.
I see.
But I have restaurants and Pliables now. Anyway.
Oh, I love that. It's funny that you say that. I actually had a bunch of stickers accumulating, and I finally decided to get a big water container, and I started sticking all the stickers on the side of it. I was very excited about it. So now I carry around this little thing with all my stickers.
Nice.
I feel like a child. It's really nice.
No, I was always a fan of the sticker. But I feel like we should probably talk about things that we should have been trained on.
It's something related to PR and not just stickers from childhood that we are
I was a
reliving
huge
as adults.
sticker collector when I was a child, but I never used them, which goes back to we could get into psychology.
Right. You don't want to waste.
But we will get into psychology today. And one of the things that will lead into other things on sort of this topic of the challenges and the difficulties of being a PR person.
Look at this amazing transition.
So things I should have been trained on. Today's topic is how to keep your head held high in the face of PR's bad rap.
Yep. I think a lot of us feel that kind of self-loathing, especially if a lot of people are doing media relations and getting feedback from journalists. Like this poor woman in the article had gotten an email back. She blurred out, but it says, "Tell someone who gives a you bottom feeder." And that was her response wrote back to her.
To a PR person. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a lot of times a very thankless job. Like clients aren't happy because you didn't get the coverage they want. Reporters hate you. You're trying to bridge the gap between the two and match make, and nobody is happy when you're meanwhile working tirelessly. It's It's brutal.
And there's always something that can happen that you never would have thought of that would have happened. So you can't prepare for everything. However, even though nobody's really trained on how to keep your head held high, it's a constant conversation. And the only thing I can say is it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
If you stick with it, you do kind of know some of the hot button issues that you can cut off at the pass before they happen. But when you first start out, you know nothing. And very few people will tell you what to look out for. And even if they do tell you, oftentimes you're 22 or 3 years old and you're not really listening. You're like, whatever, I mean, at least that's me. And then you learn the very hard way. So I think even though most PR people aren't trained on it, you learn it very quickly because you make mistakes and then you get thrown in the deep end and there you go. So I think I've told the story before about, I got I think it was like Good Day New York. It wasn't national, it was local TV though, to do a story about the newest running shoes. Do you remember this story?
I do, but remind our listeners because I'm sure they don't.
Yeah. So,
well, I'm sure a couple people remember this.
So here's really what it was for. It was for Maxim magazine, which I helped to launch in the United States, which is kind of hilarious. And what we would do is we would get the magazine galleys before it had been published for the next month and look through it and find interesting stories that they were going to publish and pitch those stories to TV, radio, print media. This is really it's the very early days of the internet, so that really wasn't part of it. And they would agree to do a story on one of the stories in the magazine. They would credit Maxim magazine, like, hey, next month in Maxim magazine, this great story about new running shoes are coming out. And there was a guy who, was like a trainer, and I met him at a gym, and he was going to be the talking head because this was his recommendations for all these running sneakers and why this was good and why that was good and expensive, cheap, and if you run all the time or if you just, a casual, etc. And we all go there. and the trainer has brought one of each of the pairs of sneakers. He didn't bring two, he didn't bring pairs, he brought one. And the reporter hit the effing roof on me. Now, I didn't bring the sneakers. I wasn't talking about the sneakers. I wasn't the expert on sneakers, but I got blamed because I was the PR person. I had no
Yep.
idea the guy wasn't bringing. Why would you take the left shoe out of every pair of sneakers when you're
Right,
doing
and
a story about sneakers?
and why would you have to warn him not to do that? I
Who
mean, a
would
lot
have,
of times,
right?
who would have thought he would even have done that?
I guess it's because it lightened his load. Like he only had to bring, 8 sneakers instead of 16 or something. But that kind of thing, and that was very early on. The
Yeah.
fact that that happened to me so early on was sort of like horrible and yet a miracle at the same time, because I learned how ridiculously detail oriented you have to be with clients to be like, okay, now make sure you're wearing clothes,
Yeah.
make sure you took a shower, like really basic stuff that
Yeah.
people just are like, what? Like they just have no idea. So, like you said, what I've even have thought to say to the guy, make sure you bring both in the pairs. Like, who would even say
Yeah.
that? But that's the kind of stuff you have to say.
For sure. Yeah. So we're
How
gonna
did I
bring
solve
8
it?
pairs of sneakers.
Right.
Didn't you have him go back and get the others?
I had him mail all of the sneakers to the studio. Then they could at least shoot the entire pairs, and they might have even gotten somebody who like worked at Good Day New York to like put them on and like run on a treadmill or something.
Oh my
But
God.
that's what we were supposed to do live. Yeah.
Right,
So
right,
anyway,
right.
so there you go.
Yeah.
So the reporter thought I was the worst, thought I was a moron,
Yep.
screamed bloody murder at me.
Yep.
This is at like 8:30 in the morning. I'm 20 whatever years old, and I was like, right. So like these,
Oh my
there was no
God.
Twitter back then, but like these tweets, like
Oh,
very easily that reporter could have been tweeting like this
horrible.
about me. So I think the thing is with now, particularly when we're talking about how reporters like, and if you're in the PR industry, as I assume all of our listeners are, otherwise why would you be listening? But how badly reporters
Stalkers.
can talk about, right, talk about you, especially on social media,
Yeah.
but even to your face, because they really have no time. It's a scary and demoralizing aspect of the job.
It's rough.
And half the time, or maybe more, it's really not your doing or your fault. There's some PR people who are really good at just not taking crap.
Yeah.
But most of us got into PR because we're people pleasers.
Right.
So it's very hard for us to push back on getting yelled at and put down
Yeah.
in a constructive way. But you do have to find, I think the training here is you do have to find a way, maybe using humor, maybe killing them with kindness, whatever is applicable to your personality,
Mhm.
try to get through those like treacherous moments.
The article says that, and I didn't even know this, it says that PR consistently ranks in the top 10 of the most stressful occupations in the US.
Yeah, no, I saw that. That's crazy to me, right? But
Yeah.
maybe it's because there can be PR emergencies at any time of the day, any day of the week.
Yep.
I feel like you have less control over the outcome than most jobs.
No, it's super, super, super stressful for all of those reasons. Yeah. So between the tight deadlines, the journalists, hating on you, clients being very hard to please, very hard to educate, it's, none of it's guaranteed. If you don't set expectations up front, then the results can be challenged. It is a very stressful industry. And I think, part of it is because the reputation of PR has gone down the toilet, which is the fault of the industry and the people in it, right? So that's not necessarily on individuals, but that's exactly why I felt like switching to trust relations was important, because I feel like there is sort of this spray and pray approach in PR. There's this sort of like spin machine mentality where it's, you can just bamboozle reporters into doing something for you, or, take them out for dinners and or get some dirt on them, blackmail them. Like, I don't know what people think. I think people have a very sinister opinion of what publicists do. And some of it is based on reality. So obviously they didn't get that out of thin air, but
Right.
I think the industry needs to be reinvented. So I think one thing to do is if the organization or agency that you're working for doesn't support a strategic approach or an ethical approach that you resonate with, I would encourage you to keep looking because there are people out there
Looking for
like
another job, you're saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
look for a home where, I mean, for example, at Trust Relations, not to turn this promotional, but I mean, we actually work with clients at the outset to make sure that their storytelling and story doing are aligned and that anywhere where they're trying to say something they're not doing, we catch it early on. We try to fix it either through messaging and or getting them to actually go and do something that's more aligned with what they want to say. And so there are places and spaces in the industry where people are working hard to combat the negative perception by just doing it differently.
Mhm.
So I would say don't give up hope. There are people out there like us that are working hard, to try to do it better. And I would also say try not to take it personally because keep in mind that these journalists are getting lambasted day in and day out by people who don't know what they're doing, who don't care, who aren't ethical, who are blasting them pitches. And, I'm sure if the tables were turned, it would be exhausting and infuriating. And
Mhm.
they probably feel demoralized in a similar way, which is why then they're reflecting that back to you. It's not a personal attack on you, it's a reflection of the state of the industry and the clash of an old school PR meets overworked journalists who are more overworked than ever before and more underpaid than ever before. And while it's a stressful job to be a PR person, I would argue that being a journalist is incredibly more stressful. Remember, it's not you, it's society. It's like where we are right now. And then I would just say the other thing is I know I've lost hope in PR in the past and actually wanted to get out of it altogether. And so I just decided to set out and do it differently. And so you can also do that, right? It depends on where you are in your career trajectory, but
Right. You can do it
you
yourself?
yeah, or find somebody like-minded that you can work for. So just because the industry itself is a bit rotten and stressful doesn't mean that there aren't pockets of goodness within it where people are trying to shine a light on the darkness and make a difference.
Yeah. Well, and we've been talking about reporters, I guess, and the external world because of the way PR is
Yeah.
portrayed in TV and movies and stuff. And this is another part I think of PR people. You got to take all the hits, right? What did I say? You get none of the glory and all of the blame. Most of
Mhm.
the time.
Yep.
Remember that you're not always in the wrong.
Mhm.
Reporters are wrong. People are wrong. So even though the industry might get crap and people might make fun of you because of what you do, they can be wrong. And reporters are sometimes crappy, and they're the ones that are in the wrong, not
Yeah,
you.
that's true too.
Don't tell them that, but just
Yeah.
just to keep centered, like, how many times have you had a reporter that agreed to do a story, even in an exclusive, and all of a sudden, like, crickets and they're nowhere? It's happened to me more than once.
Yeah.
But as a PR person, you can't go out on Twitter and be like, Bob Smith from Reuters is the worst report, right? But they'll do it to you because you need them more than they need you.
Mhm.
Unless you work for certain people or companies, right? But
Even
that's a
then,
very, very small group of people.
very small.
Yeah.
Well, should we put a fork in it?
I mean, you really want to be so violent towards our.
It's just because it's done. Put a fork in it. It's done. It's not a reference to fork
Savage.
jacking. No, no, actually, before the podcast started, we were talking about weird stories that I covered when I was a journalist.
Yeah.
And one of the weirdest ones when I was a crime reporter was that somebody had stolen a car at Fork Point. So they got in the car with a fork and they put it against the driver's neck and they thought it was a knife and away went the car. I mean, to be fair, a fork could do quite a bit of damage.
Right.
But then the headline was, carjacking at Fork Point.
What's
So
next on the
so
agenda?
let's put a fork in it, but not like that. I think that we might have been saved by the bell because I see that our guest is in the waiting room.
Oh, okay, great.
We can stop talking about this horrible subject and story. This is like so upsetting. Well, let's put on our Sunday best on a smile and let Andy in.
I'm smiling so naturally. Watch.
Hey, Andy,
Hey, hey, hey.
how are
How are
you?
you?
Well, I have an urgent question to kick things off
Oh,
here. Do I need to go fill up a glass to be officially welcomed into the interview booth here?
You mean
No,
a glass, a wine glass?
this is what I'm
Perhaps.
drinking.
If you're happier drinking wine, absolutely. I have Waterloo. I gave up the ruse at one point. I don't actually drink. And so,
Oh,
but for a while, this is funny though, for a long time, I had a wine glass that I would drink out of full of something other than wine, just
clever.
for the appearance. But eventually, Laura and I just kind of lost, I don't
Well, we
know.
record this on Mondays. So
Yeah,
like
exactly. I
Monday
was gonna
night
say, like, let's go Monday night. Let's just drown a few glasses of wine. No big deal. I was like, sure, what the heck? Why not? Well, if it's all
Yeah.
the same, I'll just continue to annihilate my sleep habits by having this glass of
Drink
black
coffee.
tea at 3:30 p.m. So
Okay. So hello everybody. Today we have Andy Lutzky. He is joining us on the PR Wind Down. And it's because I found an article that he wrote that we're going to get into. And so we really wanted to come after him to have him on the show. He's the executive
Come after him. Like chasing him down the streets of
We
Gotham.
did. Yes. He's the executive VP of Zomad. He's an influencer marketer, and he is a professor of marketing and PR at USC.
Very
And
impressive.
he's writing a book. So the reason, Andy, is I read this article, this must have been quite some time ago because I see that it was published like almost a year ago,
Yeah.
about why public relations professionals feel powerlessness and what to do about it. And we've been talking about other things, April and I today,
Yeah.
we've been recording other things that are sort of applicable to this topic. So it's sort of a theme of the day. And I want to understand, to kick it off, do you think that there's a common thread among personalities in people who choose to go into PR as a profession?
most of the things I write about have to do with the craft of public relations marketing, right? Like diving into this topic or that topic, or better understanding our role in misinformation and disinformation, those kinds of things. But I also have a lot of background in emotional and mental health. I've been fortunate to have a lot of training and personal experience there. So I also write about some of the personal and developmental issues that I have seen public relations and marketing professionals have over the course of my career. I imagine y'all and your listeners would agree that this industry we have chosen can exact a heavy toll personally, mentally, emotionally, physically. And I know it has helped me when I've been able to speak to someone who can not only provide meaningful advice, but also speak the language. So this particular post, this came out of, I'd say, about 15 years of hearing people say similar things. Like, I feel like I would regularly hear people in the industry say things like, one day I'm going to get a PR and go do something else. Or they would ask,
Yep.
like, if PR is is this something I should be doing? Or people saying that they feel like they have some kind of creative ability or hobby, but they can't access it, and they don't know why. And like everything feels heavy, and the whole day feels heavy, and they can't find the happiness or the energy in what they do. And I feel like I've had that talk with many, many employees, particularly those who are entry level, just starting out, like maybe around the mid level. And what I have attributed that to is feelings of like lack of agency, or like bigger picture, the way I describe it is like powerlessness. Especially among agencies, there is this culture of we, where everything is about the power of the collective and how the collective can work together to deliver something greater than the sum of its parts. And there are so many benefits to that approach. I'm not here to say like, oh, we is a bad thing. There are many, many benefits to that approach. It can act as a shield to younger employees. It can provide grounds for senior employees to shoulder a responsibility or a burden. It can provide additional brain power. There's a lot of good for it, but it also removes and irons out ownership moments, individualism, ability to receive direct feedback for achievements or direct demerits for things to work on in some cases. And after going through a couple of years of this, like ironing out of individualism and ironing out of like owned moment in the whole experience, among other things, it can create feelings of lack of control, lack of agency, lack of ability to keep your hand on the wheel, particularly for people that are just getting started in the industry. And I spend a whole bunch of time in the blog post explaining why that's really bad. And I would say, just like to be quick about it, there's a misconception that feelings of powerlessness can be compartmentalized when they in fact cannot. And actually, powerlessness is one of the most, they're called global feelings, where like you may feel the feeling in one part of your life, but it's one of those feelings that is so powerful that it's going to pervade your entire life. It seeps everywhere. Exactly.
It's interesting because remember April way back in the beginning of when we started this podcast, older gentleman, Arthur Solomon, I believe was his name. He was saying a lot of the same things that Andy is saying right now in terms of how the group, the collective, he didn't believe in it either for many of the same reasons of what you're saying. And this is, he's an older guy who'd been in the, PR agency world for 50 years or something. And he said it's like the people who deserve, the credit and all of that don't get it. And maybe that goes to powerlessness.
That's frequently the case. In one post, I give recommendations to agency leadership about how to either do that collective mindset well or how to untangle it. In the powerlessness post, because many junior employees don't really have that kind of authority to untangle agency culture and all, I think it's important to give those employees the tools to develop their own senses of personal power, and senses of personal power that are much more universal than just like their job or their accounts. I give recommendations in the post for how to perform daily affirmations. 3 of my most powerful ones. Number 1, whatever happens, I can handle it. And that affirmation is meant to build resilience, because in our industry, things can change often catastrophically on a dime. And it could feel like the slightest change can make or break your emotional state for the day. And that just can't be the case if you're going to make it far in this industry. Number 2, my wants matter, but they are also my responsibility. Nobody was put on this earth to meet my needs but me. Number 3, every action I take is a vote for the person I want to become. And I can read through a whole bunch of these. I've got a whole page of these. They're on my blog. I encourage people to read them. The reason I focus on those is because I sense that many people in our industry have a poorly developed sense of their wants and needs. And when you have a poorly developed sense of wants and needs, you have an even less developed ability to communicate those. And I find a lot of the powerlessness and a lot of the lack of agency that people feel comes from not having the space or ability to tap into the things you want. As a human, do you enjoy cooking? Do you enjoy writing? Do you enjoy juggling as a clown on like 42nd Street? Like, let's just start and figure out what those things are.
So that brings me back to what I had asked up front is, do you think there are certain personality traits that are in many PR people? And it sounds like you're saying that there are, and it's the not great ability to define your own needs and wants. And I would even take it a step further, and maybe one begets the other, and I'm not sure which way, is the drawing of boundaries.
I do think that there are common challenges that people in our industry have. Many people arrive at those challenges through different pathways and different means. There are some people who are just super type A, work all the time. I'm going to succeed at life, and therefore I have no time to develop a meaningful sense of community or form my own sense of wants. And then there are other people who are just really creative and love the idea of being in like a artful, creative atmosphere and being around like-minded people who just get walked all over and are not type A, but as a result develop some of the same challenges. And that's putting aside all the challenges that people work through up until they get to their career. So I've seen many different kinds of personality types all get to the same challenges. I do want to touch quickly on your point about boundaries, because I really do think that we are approaching a breaking point with people's relationships to work. I think there are many people who, over the course of their careers, have had their community readily delivered to them. They went to college. Their community was their classmates. They graduated from college. Their community was their intern class or their new hire class. And they kind of rose through the ranks of those people. And then, and we've all been through this, all of a sudden you have fewer and fewer friends who are coworker friends at work is kind of a small number of people, but you always have that community at work. Like you can spend 9 to 5 being around people, particularly if you're mid-level or senior, being around people that are showing you respect and reverence and deference. And it kind of placates some of the need for a community and fools you into thinking you already have one. Okay.
Right.
What the pandemic has done though, it has removed people from that community. And even as we return to work, like the old lunch crew is gone. Like half of them moved to the suburbs, half of them moved away to other states. So you're going to work and you're not going to have the same crews you did before. And what these people are finding after 3 years of sitting at their pajamas and their kitchen table, working for 17 hours a day, boundaries are a cause, not the symptom. They don't have boundaries because they have no community. And they've spent 10, 15, 20 years having communities handed to them. And now that they need to go create a community, they have no skills to do it on their own. And these people are lonely and really in a bad place. And we need to teach these mid-30s, mid-40s people who've been around agency life their whole lives, living in New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, LA, where it's, the agency world is hopping, but then now they're sitting at home with nowhere to talk to. They need to learn how to create community.
It's really interesting because I feel like people are talking obviously about, remote work and all of that, but I don't know that I've heard it put in exactly the way that you just put it regarding community and all of that, because I've thought about it myself. I don't know if it has to do with the pandemic, probably everything has to do with the pandemic, but I'm wondering about what about people who, pandemic or not, are a little bit outside of the fray. So, like you said, you go to high school, then you go to college, then you get your first job, and then people get married, and then people, get pregnant or have kids, and then they move to the suburbs, and, some order like that. What about the people who don't do those things? They didn't get married, or they didn't have kids, or they didn't move to the suburbs, and you lose your community that way too.
That I think is the most frequent way that community loss happens, which is to say it like slowly.
Yeah.
And that's the insidious part of it for these people. They think they've got the community thing figured out, when in fact they will literally wake up one day and realize how few friends they have.
Yeah. Now you're not even going to the office, so you're not riding on your commute, or you're not, going to the office, or you're not going out after work. I mean, it's none of that's happening.
For a lot of those people, their entire sense of identity, community, and aspiration came from work and work culture.
Yep.
And they just have no skills of creating identity or community or aspiration outside of the office. Yeah. And now that their lives are entirely outside of the office, they're adrift.
You know what's funny is, Andy, everything you're saying is like my autobiography, basically. And I can share some of those details because they're kind of funny. It's funny how much they map to your article and what you're saying now. But I'm curious, before I divulge all of that, is some of this based on your own personal experience as well? Have you kind of dipped in and out of, okay, who am I outside of PR? Is this really the industry for me? And then into, all right, this is the way that I need to rebuild myself outside of PR, so that I can, continue forward in a healthy way.
It absolutely is based on some of my own experiences and explorations. My friends and I make a good joke that people will pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a personal trainer and are completely aghast at the idea of paying for a paid professional to exercise their minds. When in reality, it's actually the harder one to work. So I have had to confront over the last few years the challenge of which is going to lead, professional aspiration or personal aspiration. Aspiration and ambition, to be clear, because aspiration and ambition are not the same. Like an aspiration is like a far-reaching objective. Yeah, something really far-reaching, far-ranging, like wanting to be a great father, wanting to leave a dent on the world, wanting to write a great book. Whereas an ambition is like a thing you want to achieve or accomplish. I want to be a great client one day. Yeah, I win an award, exactly. Earlier in my career, it was like, I'm going to become a young chief marketing officer. Right. And I realized afterwards that there was a richness and a fullness that my life was lacking, despite achieving that title, Which after I achieved the title, it wasn't like I all of a sudden was like, you know, my name was written in the stars and I could retire a happy man. If all things go well, I have like 40 years of career left in me. I got to figure out something to do here, right? So
Mhm.
it caused me to undergo a lot of thinking about what I want out of this life, how I spend my time, and it reinforced in my mind the need to have a community of people that know me deeply who I can ask for help.
So I think I'm sort of an extreme example of what you paint in the article, but this will help paint a picture for everybody that should
Extreme in what
definitely go
way?
read.
I'm excited to hear
Go,
it now.
so I started as a journalist, switched to PR, and the reason I was in journalism to start with was because I had these aspirations of being the watchdog of society. I think aspiration is appropriate in this case instead of ambition.
Hmm.
And so there was this idea that I wanted to make the world a better place, right? By being somebody who's exposing things that needed to be exposed, etc. When I switched over into PR, it was partly because I'm too much of a people pleaser. And also, what I was doing at the time was way too dark. I was a crime reporter, and I was explaining some of this to Laura earlier. It was rough. The things I had to cover were pretty rotten. And so by the time I switched to PR, it was sort of like, okay, well, I this is appropriate because I love to write, which is how I got into journalism in the first place, and I like people. And so great, it's a fit. But the part of me that had an aspiration to make the world a better place got kind of left behind. And so there was a part of me, I was representing Yellowtail Wine at the time, and I thought,
Nice.
is this what I'm doing with my life? Right? Not there's anything wrong with Yellowtail. My client was delightful. It was a fun product to pitch, but it was like, is this my life's mission? Right? Is
Yeah.
this why I'm on earth? And so I started on the side learning to DJ, ended
Nice.
up becoming a DJ to the point where it kind of cut into slash undermined my my
Your day
PR
job.
job, my day job. That got derailed. Ended up quitting PR basically for a stretch of years and only focusing on music productions, and then realized I couldn't make a living doing this. But it was sort of like I need to find meaning in my life, and instead of just adding meaning to my life outside of work like you're suggesting as the healthy work mix, I went all the way to the other side and teetered all the way into, destroying the PR career basically. Well, not destroying, because obviously here I am again, but at the moment, basically just, throwing it in the garbage and derailing it. And then I came back and I was able to do both. So then it was like, okay, I'm doing music on the side on the weekends, at night, etc., whatever, right? It's like, this is
Right.
how I make money. It doesn't have to be the only thing that I do in life. And so over time, I started, obviously, not then I started Trust Relations, which I feel strongly about is making the world a better place at the risk of sounding lofty, but it feels meaningful again, right? So I was able to find a way for myself to carve my aspirations and ambitions into the same pole star and pull in the same direction. And I still actually tonight have a cover band gig, which is why I'm a little extra makeup, because if I didn't have this thing tonight, I guarantee you I would work until midnight or 1 a.m.
Would it surprise you if you heard that your journey was actually pretty typical?
No, it would not, because I know a lot of people have quit and gone into yoga or quit and gone, and then they're like, "Oh, this doesn't really pay the bills."
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
totally.
I'm a
Mhm.
Pilates instructor. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not working.
Yep.
So there's a book that I recommend all your listeners read by Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer of Eat, Pray, and Love. The book is called
Mhm.
Big Magic, and Big Magic is it's like a love story to the art of creativity and a guidebook on how to form a deep, loving relationship to your creativity. But one of the things that I took away from that book that I feel like I quote more than most is the sense that people feel this responsibility that their creativity has to fuel their ambition. Like the creativity has to pay the bills, or the creativity isn't paying the bills and you aren't doing it enough.
Yep,
And like for 99% of us, that's both unrealistic and not fair to our creativity. Like
it's not.
we're taking our creativity and the thing that we think we get as like
Monetizing it.
yeah, I think is like energizing and loving, and we're putting the weight of the world on it before it's even a
Yep,
thing, and that
yep,
crushes it. It's okay to allow your work fuel your creativity. Like, get yourself a job that allows you the time or space or provides you the means to try it out. Like you're saying, like you found a job that allows you to marry your aspirations and ambitions nicely, and also affords you necessary, forceful space to get out of the house and do something you totally love, and you're not pressured to go join the band to go pay the bills. Like,
yep. And I think there is a lot of pressure put on people that, you're not a good artist if you're not making money on it at it. And that's simply not true.
Agreed.
So it's much more, I think what we're talking about is, really important for people that, and a lot of people in PR tend to be creative. And so this is something where you need to find an outlet that fulfills you and honor that, and not say, oh, I'm just doing this stupid thing on the side that makes no money when I should be doing PR, which makes money. It's like,
Right.
well, if that's what fuels you and that's what makes you show up every day excited to be there and excited to live, then you have to do that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're just showing up at your PR job, half it, half there, emotionally disconnected and creatively smashed, I mean, it's like
Totally.
you're not giving your full self. So it's better to give less time to the job and give more to give more of yourself when you're there.
Totally. Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure that we've been taught to put on ourselves, that the job you have, like you said, the job you have has to be great for the world and fulfilling to your personal ambitions outside of work and fulfill your creativity. And oh, by the way, make $300,000 a year. And like that just it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And I hear the advice that some of these college graduates and recent graduates get in like their final address and their first jobs, and I'm like, this is you're being set up for like an unrealistic career of like you're looking for jobs that don't exist, much less to recent college graduates.
Right. Yeah. Do a job, do something creative. And if you need something to make the world a better place, volunteer. Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like you need to do a combination of things. It's not, I mean,
Yes.
it's a little bit like expecting your partner to be like the end all be all social life that you have, and,
Oh,
and not having anything outside of no therapist, no best friend, no,
Other
mentory. Like, it's
family,
like,
yeah.
like none of the other, I mean, that's not fair to the person. That's also not fair to the job. Right. So,
we could do a whole podcast on that, April. I have many, many, many thoughts that all agree with what you just said. So
yeah. So anyway, Andy, I know we've been asking you a ton of questions. Do you have a question for us?
I think you and I have a particularly aligned view on trust.
Mm,
And one of the things that I've been speaking about to my classes lately, I just saw the the blog post y'all posted on your social channels around influencer marketing, which is, as you mentioned in the intro, I spend my day job. I talk to brands about how they should use influencers and how they should integrate influencers, particularly smaller influencers, into their marketing stack. I would love to hear your take, and we can back and forth this a little bit, the relationship between influencers and trust, because I think this is an emerging area for marketers that is not well integrated yet into how they
mm.
see their job for PR and marketing people. Like, what are your opening thoughts on that relationship?
So if you really back out and you zoom out, public relations just means relating to the public, right? And when it was first started, it wasn't necessarily media specific. It's gotten very media heavy, but it meant communities. It meant influential people that were not influencers at the time, but people of note. It meant, potentially politicians that you needed to sway to help things move in your favor. It meant other business leaders, right? It's a community, etc. Like it was the holistic approach of how do we relate to the public in a way that helps us advance our business mission goals, etc. And I think if you look at it from that lens, it's like, okay, well, obviously influencers fall within that. And I think where it feels muddy to people is that media relations and PR have been known for a long time as being the earned media side of marketing. Now, influencer relations breaks that. Influencer relations without, money exchange, or at least free product exchange, is not a thing. I think that's where it confuses people, is that, okay, is PR still earned media, or is it something else? And obviously, I think anybody in the industry knows it's starting to morph, and it's more complicated than just earned media. So you obviously have, okay, well, we got you on the Forbes Council, but by the way, it's, $2,000 a year to be on the Forbes Council. Oh, we got you on the Newsweek expert panel, but oh, by the way, it's, X amount of dollars. So there's that. And then there's also, oh, we got you a speaking opportunity, but you have to be a sponsor to do it. And it's only $20,000 to sponsor the booth, which gets you a speaking up, right? So all of these things are getting blurrier and messier, I think, as we go.
So you touch on something that, oh, I have a very long paper on this that I have not yet released. So I'm kind of
Oh,
scooping myself here.
oh my gosh, this is
Um,
We have
exciting.
an exclusive.
this is exclusive reveal. So what you're talking about, how there's like a higher order issue at play here. I truly think the genesis that you're referring to is the way marketing organizations, client side, the way
Mm,
marketing organizations are not structured in a way that is best suited to capture stakeholder trust in the way that it moves today. I think that the way they're organized today is more the result of the arbitrary organizations. And you can tell the organizations are arbitrary because when you go from company to company, what constitutes advertising, marketing, and PR is amorphous.
right.
You can go from one client to another, and what they call PR marketing advertising is different than what other company calls PR marketing and advertising. And I'm not sure that the structures as they are today are set up to best capture the kinds of consumers that they're going to need to capture in the years ahead.
Mm,
But particularly as not just influencer marketing, but increasingly public relations and other parts of the organization need to have a better relationship with SEO and SEM. They need to have a better relationship with the creative side of the house. I think there is an entire yet to be developed sense of the organization around the or what I'm calling organic.
hmm
And what I'm referring to as organic is a body whose job it is to engage with the world and the internet on their terms, not your terms.
hmm
And there's going to be a need for people who are like the people you release into the internet, into the world, to go live on someone else's terms, but also but still influence the way they see your brand. I think we're due for a couple of brave organizations to fundamentally rethink the way they structure how influence is conducted in the worlds of PR, marketing, and advertising. I think are these older structures that aren't necessarily the best fit for most brands to do this in the world today.
Think that's a mic drop there. So I don't even know where we go. I don't know where we go from there. I think where we go from there is how people can find you, and a little plug here of the book that you've got coming up and what it's about, if whatever you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm writing a book about how I believe that misinformation is actually a cultural pattern that has been repeated several times over the course of human history. And I share a couple of examples that are telltale signs that we're due for a period of particularly high amounts of misinformation and ways that marketers and public relations professionals can actually short circuit those patterns. So I'm working on that right now. And in the meantime, ways people can find me. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, shoot me an email. I also teach at USC, University of Southern California. I teach graduate classes in public relations and marketing. If you're interested in taking some graduate classes and hearing from me, come on over. I frequently write about some of these topics on my website, andylutzky.com. I'm always happy to talk to people either on a client basis or an individual basis to help them think through some of these thorny problems.
Well, Andy, you have been an absolutely amazing guest. I feel like you're the definition of why we created the PR Wind Down and why we have guests like you on. So thank you for being like the quintessentially perfect guest for this podcast.
It was an honor. I'm happy to come back at any time. I love what y'all are doing. I love your message. I love your perspective on this. Keep it up. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We'll let you run now to your very busy schedule of writing things that are complex past 10 pages. And
Yes, I
and
appreciate it.
hope you keep in touch.
Likewise, thank you so much. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful time, and speak again soon.
Thanks, Andy. Sounds good.
Bye bye.
Bye. Do you want to move on to the PR news of the week?
Well, I found the story about a reporter who was stabbed to death outside of his house, and they were thinking it was done by someone that this reporter had written like an investigative journalism piece about. So the latest story that I have seen now is that a Nevada county official has been arrested and charged with murder. So they think it's a county official in Vegas has killed this reporter. Robert Tellis was arrested on Wednesday following a SWAT operation. The reporter's name is Jeff German, and he was stabbed to death outside his home. Tellis has served as the Clark County public administrator, and he blamed the reporter, German, for ruining his career in politics and his marriage, prosecutors said. So this county guy, Tellis, made his first appearance, and he was held without bail. Wow. I guess he took a number of steps to cover up this crime, including casing the neighborhood for more than an hour, leaving his cell phone at home, and dressing in disguise.
Yeah, I see that. His disguise was a straw hat and a reflective vest? Stabbed him 7 times.
And I guess there's a number of stories written about him.
Wait, so what did this series of stories that German wrote about Tellis reveal that ruined his career and his marriage?
I guess they're saying he was, open and transparent and serving as a watchdog for the government. And this guy was a county. I mean, so you've been in a similar sort of, right?
Yep. I think I told you about the time that I revealed they did a prostitution ring bust. And I listed all the names, the Johns that were involved all got listed. That's a situation where I could have gotten myself in trouble. I'm just going to read more of this. This is from Daily Beast. John Cahill never saw it coming. In 2018, after serving 12 years as Clark County Public Administrator, a low-key elected position responsible for securing the estates of recently deceased Las Vegans, Cahill anointed a fellow Democrat as his would-be successor. Once Tellis took over, Cahill did start to catch wind of trouble, like whispers from employees that Tellis was pretty hostile if he thinks people are pushing back on him. Then Las Vegas Review-Journal investigative journalist Jeff German's articles started coming out in May about Tellis allegedly providing over an atmosphere rife with bullying and favoritism in Cahill's old workplace. But even after the two old allies exchanged a many war of words on Facebook, Cahill stressed he would not describe Tellis, who lost a bid for re-election in the wake of German's reporting, as a violent man, which made what came next all the more stunning. On Wednesday night, Tellis was arrested after allegedly disguising himself and fatally stabbing German 7 times during an altercation next to the journalist's garage the previous Friday morning. How could he be so dumb? How would he think he'd get away with this? Cahill asked. None of this makes sense. It's so mind-boggling. Tellis stalked him. He hunted him. He got a disguise. He put a lot of thought into this. It's still hard to believe. The macabre slaying and Tellis' subsequent arrest after authorities found his DNA under German's fingernails has rattled journalists, sparked right-wing media fervor, and sent shockwaves through the Las Vegas community.
Do you think this is just because this guy's a little nuts, or is this something, that journalists have to be more and more concerned with?
This is definitely concerning. I hope it's just that there was a guy with a screw loose who was delusional and think he could get away with something, and that this was ruining his life. It sounds to me like the case of a personality disorder where he thought he was right, and anybody who questioned his authority or sense of order was going to get and then just for him to be called on that, I think probably sent him over the edge. But I mean, I hope it's not a society problem. I hope it's more of like,
look at all the journalists who get murdered internationally, reporters covering wars and stuff. I mean, I think that continues to increase year over year. I mean, some of them have been tortured. Now, I know this is domestic and it's, in a small-ish market, etc. I guess as the world gets crazier, everybody's more at risk, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's true in
but
general.
Is this going to keep, reporter, like, why would you want to be a reporter if you might be putting your life on the line? I
mean, especially in this context, right? It's one thing if you're like a foreign correspondent for a war or something. It's another thing if you're like just covering like county politics in freaking Las Vegas. And like, that's weird. I guess we should do the horror story since we just got into something kind of horrific.
Okay, why don't you read it? I think I read last week's.
Okay, one moment, please. Okay. Do not open until podcast. Hello. Well, I talked my client into a really good idea. And then the idea, drum roll please, did not work. Here's what happened. New client startup, consumer product, expensive face cream. $50 per ounce to, quote, turn back the clock on aging the natural way. So we were having a really hard time getting this client anything but affiliate placements for roundups. They wanted more of a feature, so I suggested we do some product samples and target some key beauty and lifestyle reporters. The client was extremely resistant to this. Our point of contact is very protective of the product and very, very budget conscious, which is kind of funny. This is a side note, funny to me that it's $50 per ounce in they're budget conscious. Anyway, back to the story. I explained that I had done it before with good success. And I have. Just asked my friendlies at Vanity Fair and Cosmo. It took months, but the client agreed to try it. So I pitched the sample to a pub I hadn't worked with before, top tier, but must go unnamed in the story for the sake of my relationship with the client and the outlet. And I connected with a reporter. She expressed she was thrilled to get the sample, couldn't wait to try it. I was stoked. The client seemed hopeful too, albeit begrudgingly. So we mail the sample, and the reporter tells us to keep an eye on the beauty section for the next month. A month comes and goes. No story. The client gets agitated, so I gently follow up. Crickets. 2 weeks pass. I gently nudge again. She replies to me, so sorry about this. Really didn't like the face cream. Gave it to my mom, though, and she loves it. Don't cover things I don't like, so I won't be writing. Thanks, though. Now, I, myself, have sampled the product. It was really difficult to convince them to cough up samples for the team, but I can confirm it was nice. So I have to take this feedback to the client. How the heck do I convince him to keep trying? Sincerely, stood up. Oh, that is awful. Oh my God, I hate it.
I know. I just haven't done enough consumer PR to know is there a pivot? Because I'm sure that kind of stuff is not, rare. So what's the
the next best thing to try is convincing them again to try a different reporter. But then the problem is they're going to think that it's you and that you didn't have a good enough relationship, or you didn't know the right person to send it to, or it was the wrong outlet, or fill in the blank, yada, yada, yada. So it's not a great look for the publicist, who obviously has great connections given some of the name dropping. I mean, obviously knows what they're doing given how they're, navigating this gently.
Yeah.
It is really, really difficult when you have a consumer client that is stingy on samples. I will tell you that. I mean, it's something in the biz dev process, which doesn't help this person, but I try anytime it's a consumer client. One of the main things that I'm vetting them for is, do you have enough product to send samples?
Well, sending those
how soon will you have samples? Or
those little square packets you get at Sephora where there's 1/100th of an ounce in there.
Oh my God. We had one client. It was an in-house HVAC connected system with designer scents that could be piped through your HVAC system. So you know how hotels and a lot of retail places have these designer scents and they're kind of wafting through the whole place.
Right.
So it was for your home. It was a residential thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they were offering to have these things shipped to reporters.
Jeez, who's got an HVAC system?
Well, that's the problem, because most reporters are
live in New York City in an apartment that's 100 years old, like mine.
Yes. And there's no way and no universe in which their landlord is going to let them cut a hole in their HVAC system to install.
There is no HVAC system, but yes, go on.
It's bad enough to get some big thing shipped to your house when you don't have enough space. But then what do you do about installing? Then you have to hire somebody or do it yourself or get a guy or.
Oh my God.
So basically it turned out to be a nightmare. And we were like, we need to get like a small version of this. Is there like a desktop, tabletop, whatever? But then of course we look like jackasses because we were just sending these little, sample-y scent things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not enough. So it was like the whole thing was really difficult. Really,
So
really
that's
difficult.
sort of a similar
nightmare.
I think what this PR person needs to do is convince the client to make those little sample packets of their product like they give away at Sephora. So then they're
And-
not giving a whole jar away.
But then
Well,
it's
it's like my sneaker story. Like,
yeah.
how would you even know to ask that question? Do you have samples that you're willing and able to send to reporters?
And
Yes.
how big is it? How hard is it? How do you install it?
Right.
Is there
But
any
I mean like this face cream that this,
Right. You have to know
There's
how big of an
at
ask
least
it is for the person receiving it too. So, that's rough. Let's see. The main thing to do, man, this is rough.
You can't
I think
do
you
your
just,
job if you don't have samples. If you're
you
giving
just, I think I would just say it's a little bit of a numbers game when it comes to sampling. And, I'm sorry that the first one we tried was a fail, but to give it a full try, we need to give at least 2 more reporters the product. And let's come up with, to your point, Laura, like a sample size that you're more comfortable with in terms of parting with the price point of it. That
Also,
isn't
are
going to
they
feel.
are they doing an influencer campaign?
Well, they
You know,
can't
social-
without product.
They need product for that too. So the
There's
client
nothing
is crazy.
to do with that. The client's
Yeah.
crazy, and there's nothing to do with that product.
No.
Well, with that, should we wrap it up? Thank you so much for tuning in for the PR Wind Down podcast.
And thank you to Andy for joining us for one of the best interviews we've had.
Absolutely. Yes, hands down. Remember to submit your own agency stories and questions and to share our show with your friends and colleagues. If you subscribe and leave us a rating, it will help us reach new listeners like you.
And if you have an anonymous PR horror story of your own, please send it our way at the email address below the episode notes.
We cannot wait to wind down with you again next time.
I'm from New York, originally, so I am well versed in fighting off all kinds of safety threats. But
and actually, it's funny because a friend of mine recently, who's never been, thought that it was like Gotham City from the comic book movies, where it's like the really like dark garbage everywhere. Everyone's trying to murder or
I'm cool perpetuating a stereotype. That's cool. Let's let them think that. That's cool. Let's just carry that on. But yes, the strange Capes Crusaders drop from rooftops and beat up criminals. There's all kinds of
like
weird mischief.
Graffiti
There's
everywhere.
graffiti everywhere. It's like a dystopian nightmare.
Like dumpsters in every alley.
Yeah,
There's no alleys. That's
no alleys.
Right.
Yes, there's no alleys anymore. 1950s mobsters set up shop in like dingy restaurants. Like, yeah, let's just perpetuate that. That's cool. Yeah, that take down crime by itself.
Or at least keep the tourists out.